I would try to stay away from your comfort zone, and you should go out of your comfort zone to meet English speaking friends. Try to resist the temptation of hanging out with your fellow citizens who might be living there, and try to just make it almost a game where you've got to test yourself as much as possible to only rely on your English speaking skills and never fall back on Spanish. Hello, hello, hello. Hola, buenos días, buenas tardes, and welcome back to Inglesbritanico podcast. I'm Lewis, I'm sure you know that, and over there, sipping a cup of tea, it seems, we have my co-host. Chris, how are you?
I'm very good, thanks, Lewis. Yeah, I'm still in England. I fly back to Spain tomorrow. So I'm trying to take advantage of all the cups of tea, which I'm not making, which my mum is making for me. So, yeah.
So you're being spoiled rotten. You're being pampered at the moment.
I'm being very pampered. I'm 36 years old and I'm still getting pampered when I go home. And I wouldn't change it for the world. Yeah.
I mean, make the most of it, and using a synonym of make the most of, because this is something that a lot of Spanish people do ask me. Luis, ¿cómo se dice aprovechar en inglés? And you just use one of them, and I've just used the other. You said that you are taking advantage of being home to have a cup of tea. So take advantage of, aprovechar. And I used make the most of, which is another way of saying aprovechar. So yeah, make the most of it whilst you can.
Yeah, I think it's important to note with both of these expressions, the verb would be in the ing form because of the preposition to take advantage of doing something or make the most of doing something.
Exactly. Fantastic. Now, this week we've got an interesting topic, which is very, very related to what we do. It is teaching English to Spanish speakers and the whole topic of learning languages. So we're going to discuss ways in which people can improve their language skills, English skills, and immerse themselves in the language without actually leaving the country. But before we get onto that, let's go over another couple of phrases or two. So, Chris, tell us a phrase that you taught on your Instagram channel over the last 7 days.
Yeah, definitely. One of the best videos I taught this week, in my opinion, is ¿qué significa nightcap? And yeah, hemos hablado de esto antes. Ya sé qué significa, pero estoy tan como en just yeah, it's my thing now. I know it's wrong, but it's my thing. But sorry, ¿qué significa nightcap? Obviously, the original meaning was a cap to sleep. Think of Ebenezer Scrooge, A Christmas Carol is a great example with the nightcap.
Uh-huh.
However, maybe you still wear a nightcap, Lewis. I don't know, but I think
Uh-uh.
in modern English, it's not very common to talk about the object nightcap. However, we use nightcap to mean the last drink before bed. Normally alcoholic, but not always. Very, very common with my parents, for example. When they come visit me in Gijón, we'll go to a restaurant and then maybe a bar, but then they will go for a nightcap at the hotel bar before going to their hotel room. So it's just a nice way to say the last drink of the night. Hey, should we go for a nightcap? The last drink before going to bed. Obviously, we're both British. We're both very familiar with a nightcap, I think.
Exactly. And I want to go out with your parents. It seems like they're a good laugh. If you are referencing your parents when speaking about a nightcap and going out for drinks, they sound like a good laugh. I mean, I wouldn't mind having a drink with your rents, your
Yeah.
parents.
With my folks, which is another word I taught on Instagram this week. I won't go into it, but yes, my folks, my parents. Yeah, I think it helps that they don't stay in my flat. So because they have a hotel room, the hotel bar is a very convenient place to go for one more drink, and then you just get the elevator or get the stairs up to your room.
Okay. And
So what about you,
interesting.
Lewis? What was what? Oh, sorry.
No, no, no. I'll go over mine in a second, but you sounded a bit American there, Chris. Um, you said that they can get the elevator, which sounds very American.
I
How
think
would we
I've
say
been
it in
brainwashed. Yeah, I think I've been brainwashed by Netflix, honestly. I watch so much Netflix, Stranger Things, The Office, The American Office. And now I think my English is becoming more American. Yeah, movie instead of film, elevator instead of lift. I know, I know. I hate myself for it. But yeah,
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just pulling your leg, I'm just having a laugh. But yeah, one of the phrases that I taught a few days ago was, ¿Cómo se dice? No pasa de moda. And this is related to the positive phrase. So if something is trendy or it's fashionable or it's in fashion, está de moda, I could say that, for example, my leather jacket is fashionable. It's in fashion, it's stylish. And then the kind of opposite, no pasa de moda, means that it never goes out of fashion. So, ¿cómo se dice? No pasa de moda. It doesn't go out of fashion. It doesn't go out of style. Or you could also say that it is timeless. It is timeless. It never goes out of fashion. So, yeah.
so
And
I'm
also,
interested to know which examples you used in your video. So what would you say doesn't go out of fashion? What's an example?
I mean, I would say that just plain black or white t shirts are timeless. They never go out of fashion. But I think the example I gave was a leather jacket. So a standard leather jacket is timeless. It never goes out of fashion. It never goes out of style. I mean, it always looks good. Do you
Yeah.
agree?
Elvis started it, but yeah, even now, 70, 80 years later, it still looks fashionable. I completely agree.
Exactly. Now, let's get into the topic and get to the point. Let's cut to the chase, ir al grano. And Chris, tell us, do you think it's possible to become fluent in English without ever leaving Spain, Colombia, Argentina, or wherever it is you are from?
Yes, I do think it is possible, but I think we should start this conversation, sorry, by being realistic and saying it is maybe the best way to learn a language is to go and live in the country. Obviously, lots of teachers, ourselves included, might do some marketing, yeah, you don't need to leave the country. And it's true, you don't need to leave the country, but I think we should just clarify. Maybe you have a different opinion, but I think, just to clarify, in my opinion, the best way to learn a language is to live in that country and immerse yourself. But it is possible without doing that. So, just before we crack on, would you agree, just to begin the podcast, that it is maybe the best way is to live in a country, but not possible for everyone? People with children or jobs, it can be difficult.
Yeah, I agree, but not 100%, because I think the clear and key difference maker is actually being surrounded by people who speak that language. And it is true that a lot of people can fall into the trap of moving abroad, and just because you're abroad, you assume that it just happens naturally, that naturally you're gonna make English friends, you're gonna go to places where you're surrounded by English speakers, and everything just falls into place. When in fact, it's a lot trickier than that, it's a lot harder than that. And as human beings, I think when we move abroad, you're already away from your friends and your family. We look for a bit of kind of a home comfort or
Yeah.
something that reminds of us of home. So I say all this because right now I'm living in Belgium and I don't have that many Belgian friends. Very, very, very few. And you would think, okay, I live in Belgium, so I should be in a French speaking environment or a Flemish speaking environment. But it couldn't be farther from the truth because I live with my Spanish fiance. She has Spanish friends. So I've kind of immersed myself in Spanish
Yeah.
whilst living in a different country. I don't know if you have a similar feeling or experiences where you've lived in Spain, but not actually being able to immerse yourself 100%?
Well, I mean, a very interesting anecdote is actually from the perspective of Spanish people who I've met in England. When I was dating my first Spanish girlfriend from Madrid, this was in Brighton. So we met in England. She was from Madrid. I'm obviously from Brighton. I didn't speak any Spanish at this point in my life. And I remember on the second date and the third date, her Spanish friends in Brighton were asking me to join in the plan. You think that's a bit weird, right? A new relationship, one or two dates. Oh, bring and meet the friends. The reason was because without me there, they all spoke in Spanish to each other. So I think it's very interesting what you said. Yeah, they moved to England and yeah, they did English classes, they went to supermarkets in English. But when they were socializing, they were a group of Spanish people. Again, it's that home comfort. It's nice to have that see, yeah, that comfort to be able to speak your own language, but then you don't practice English. So I remember they used to want me to come with their plans just so they could speak in English because I didn't speak Spanish. So I totally agree. Yeah, it's one thing living there, but you do need to put yourself in the situation. I imagine it's the same for you in Argentina, but when I lived in Mexico and Madrid, I made Spanish speaking friends. So that's what helped me learn Spanish was not just living in Spain or Mexico, but socializing with Spanish and Mexicans. I imagine that was the same for you.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in Argentina, this was obviously a long time ago now, but I went there and stayed with an Argentinian family, and there weren't other English people in the town where I was living, so I had no choice really but to put myself out there and try to communicate with as many people as possible, only using Spanish. Of course, some of them spoke fairly good English, so there'd be moments when maybe they wanted to practice their English with me, but most of the time I would insist on speaking Spanish to them. And I think this is something that everybody should do whenever they do make the decision to move abroad, to the US, to Ireland, to the UK. I would try to stay away from your comfort zone, and you should go out of your comfort zone to meet English speaking friends. Try to resist the temptation of hanging out with your fellow citizens who might be living there, and try to just make it almost a game where you got to test yourself as much as possible to only rely on your English speaking skills and never fall back on Spanish. Like in Argentina, this was easy because I was living with a family. But then when I moved to Seville, I did end up speaking a little bit more English because I was teaching English. And at the school, I made some English friends because they were in the same boat as me.
Yeah.
Um, did you have a similar situation as well where you made English friends in Spain? Because I guess there is a bigger English population that lives abroad in Spain.
Yeah, I think and I think from our perspectives as English teachers, we get a job in an academy. And so you instantly meet other English or Americans or native English speaking teachers. So it's a great way to make friends. On your very first week in a new city, you're surrounded by other English teachers, native English speakers. So you end up going for a beer after class. Are you speaking in Spanish? Of course you're not. You're speaking in English because you're with other English speakers. So I think it is easy to fall back on that comfort. But as you mentioned, get out of your comfort zone. So I think to get back on track, sorry, that was my fault for distracting,
No, 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 no. It's
derailing
interesting.
the conversation. But as we both mentioned, I think it's immersion. So it doesn't necessarily have to be living in another country. I think it's totally achievable to immerse yourself in English in Spain. What would be some
Mhm.
good ways to do this, do you think, Lewis, to immerse yourself in English without leaving Spain or Mexico, Colombia, etc.?
Well, I think it's all about habits and thinking about what habits you would normally do in your mother tongue and seeing if you can switch them to English. That way, it's not that difficult to adjust and change from one thing to another. Because, for example, I love running or going for a walk, and usually I listen to podcasts at the same time. So, tip number one is to try to change what you listen to from your mother tongue into your target language. So, if you like football and usually listen to a football podcast, listen to it in English. If you like cooking, listen to it in English. If you like politics, listen to it in English. So that for me is maybe the first thing and maybe the most entertaining thing. Of course, I'm biased because I love podcasts, but I think this is the best thing you can start out by doing. And of course, we are recording this podcast with the intention of you having some intermediate level English speaking that you can listen to, adjust to, and get used to. So that is my first tip. Um, Chris, what do you think about that? And what is your next tip?
So I completely agree with you. I think the key thing is to enjoy what you're listening to or what you're doing. I hear stories all the time from students who listen to English specific podcasts and they get bored because they're not really enjoying it. They're not being entertained, but they want to learn English. I think you can learn a lot more English by listening to a podcast about cooking or Inglesbritanico podcast, maybe. If I think these are quite entertaining, hopefully. So
Let's
yeah,
hope so.
but I think that's the key. You gave the example of podcasts when you're running. I love video games. So in the past, I would play FIFA or I would play video games in the Spanish language. Like you said, it's just a small change, but something I would do maybe every day. And it's just that small input every day, that passive learning of just reading the menu, empieza nuevo juego, or seguir el juego guardado, things like this that just stick in your brain without really learning it. So I 100% agree. I think another tip, it sounds quite obvious, but I think we need to mention it. And this is not self promotion for Lewis and myself. This is not that. Maybe a little bit, but it's teaching, it's classes. I think, yeah, listening to podcasts is great. Playing video games in English is great. But classes, regular classes, is where you're able to use this new information, this new vocabulary, and put it into practice, which I think is one of the most important things about languages is to use it, to remember it, and also be corrected if there are any mistakes. So again, no self-promotion intended, but I think, yeah, would you agree classes are essential, or maybe there are other ways to circumvent these classes?
So I think 100% the most important thing is speaking and producing the language because, in my opinion, it's really, really easy and enjoyable to immerse yourself in English in a very passive way. So, of course, we'll go into more detail with it, but basically, listen in English, watch things in English, read things in English. If you do these three things as part of your routine, and you usually do these in your mother tongue anyway, so why not just switch them out into the target language? That's the easiest way of doing it, and it doesn't require any real additional time or effort because you were going to do it anyway, so why not just do it in English? So that is, I'd say, the most important thing and the easiest thing to transition and change. But of course, you're not going to speak fluently if you're just watching, reading, and listening. Like, I'm really good at understanding various languages French, Italian, Portuguese. I'm awful at speaking them. I have,
Blowing your own trumpet there a little bit. Yeah, just I can
I'm,
easily understand these 6, 7, 8 different languages. Yeah.
I'm really good at passive learning because I like it and it's enjoyable and I've been doing it for a long time. But the difference is that I don't actually speak any of them ever. So when the moment arrives to actually speak them, I go blank. My mind goes blank because I haven't got the practice of speaking. So if you have friends who are English speakers, chat with them once or twice a week. If you want to use AI, you can speak to ChatGPT once or twice a week. Of course, it's limited with the amount of credits you have and stuff like that, which is where maybe it's not ideal. But essentially, you need to be able to produce the language, so write it and speak it. And if you don't have this facility, this option in your social circle, then really your only two options are paying for classes or doing some kind of language exchange with somebody else who would like to learn your mother tongue. And that way you give a little bit and you receive a little bit, which is why it's usually free. So for people with a lower budget, this is a better option. But if you really want to go the extra mile and go above and beyond to improve your speaking when you don't have somebody to speak to, you need to get some kind of classes.
Yeah, I think discipline is also important in both of those contexts. Obviously, classes, the discipline is very important that you keep going and keep practicing. And with the language exchanges as well, it's very normal that maybe you start speaking one language a lot more than the other one. So one person is benefiting more than the other. So it's very important to be disciplined and say, no, today is English, tomorrow is Spanish, or 2 hours of English, 2 hours of Spanish, because it's very normal for people to feel more comfortable in one language so they don't actually practice the other one. So then one person is getting the raw end of the deal, the bad part of the deal, the raw end of the deal.
It sounds like you're speaking from experience. Have you taken these language exchange classes before? Because personally, I've done it, but only a few hours in total. And I kind of got a bit fed up of it because I just thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I might as well just have classes or speak to a friend who will help me out with Spanish. So I'm not a huge fan, but I recognize that it is a good option if you don't want to spend money on classes. But yeah, what's your experience been like?
Very similar to as I was just mentioning, it was mainly in English. So I went with the intention to help people with their English, but also to practice some Spanish. But then you become comfortable, you're having a good conversation. So maybe it becomes more difficult to go to Spanish, to switch from English to Spanish. See, I think it's that. I mean, I don't know about you and your fiance, for example, but in my experience, it's very common that you speak the language that you begin with. So if you begin with your fiance in Spanish when you first meet, it's very natural, in my opinion, that 5, 6 years later, you normally use Spanish because that's how you met. I don't know if that's the same for you and your fiance or friends or.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I met my fiance back when she was on her Erasmus in Liverpool. I was finishing my degree. My degree was also a languages degree. So I kind of I don't want to say in a mean way, but I kind of used her slightly as a person to speak Spanish to, and she was very patient and enjoyed kind of helping me out a little bit. And at the same time, back then, her English was quite a lot better than my Spanish. So she was generous enough and selfless enough to make our language Spanish. Like, of course, we could still speak normally, but her English was probably better than my Spanish. And since then, we've continued with Spanish as the main language. Of course, there's a lot of Spanglish. There are a lot of different moments where maybe we'll switch to English. We definitely watch a lot more English TV programs, series, and films.
Yeah.
So in that way, there's more immersion for her. But yeah, Spanish does continue to be our main, let's say, love language or relationship language, and that is usually the case. So that is a piece of advice for everybody, that if you are going out with someone, you're dating someone, or you're starting a friendship with someone, try and insist on using the language that you want to improve. English in this case, because it will probably stick and it will probably stay that way for the rest of the relationship.
Yeah, or don't even insist, just use English and don't give them another option. Yeah, yeah. And that's what I do now is when I meet new girls or when I'm on Tinder, I try to start in English. And then if they speak English, brilliant. If we are together for a months or years, I know that it'll mainly be English with some Spanish, like you mentioned, but mainly in English. However, unfortunately, normally it becomes Spanish because as you mentioned, when one person has a higher level than the other person, you normally just choose that language. So it's kind of happened to me now. I get stuck in Spanish and then I can never speak in English, which is annoying.
And another thing that I'd like to go over, maybe we can mention Tinder and meeting people, but first I want to go back to series, films, etc. Because I'll receive this question quite a lot. And it is, okay, shall I watch it with subtitles or without subtitles, with subtitles in English or subtitles in Spanish? And I have my own kind of opinion with this, but I'm curious to hear yours. What do you usually advise your students?
So I advise my students that it depends on what they want to improve. If they want to improve their listening, I would say without subtitles. In English, without any subtitles, Spanish nor English, nothing. However, if they want to improve their vocabulary or their grammar, their sentence structure, then I advise them to watch it with English subtitles so they can see the sentence structure. This helped me in Spanish. By watching Spanish series with the subtitles, I was able to improve my grammar, not necessarily my vocabulary, but my grammar improved because I was seeing it written. Ah, so no es una bonita casa, es una casa bonita. Vale, okay. So little things like that. I don't know how you advise your students.
Pretty much the same, to be honest. The only thing I disagree with completely is watching a series or film in English with Spanish subtitles. That I think it's a complete waste of time. Like, um, I think if you are serious about your language learning and immersion in that language, we shouldn't be translating so much. Of course, you can translate little phrases like we do in our content when we're posting it, just to make it maybe more memorable, perhaps. But the difference and difficulty is that when you're watching a series, etc., you're going to notice that not everything is translated directly. And there are different ways that translators or interpreters will kind of continue with the same meaning, but they won't actually translate it word for word. And this can be quite confusing. So then I definitely don't agree with that and recommend that because I think you're just wasting time and it'll be confusing for you. So what I recommend is English with English subtitles, and then you pick up new words, phrases, and grammar at the same time. And then, if you really want to challenge yourself and test yourself as you realize that you understand practically everything, then remove the subtitles and see how you get on because it's a challenge. And if you end up understanding everything, you can give yourselves a pat on the shoulder slash the back and think,
Yeah,
I can live in English.
exactly. So sorry for just leaving for a second. My phone was running out of battery, so I had to quickly run and get a charger. Yeah,
I was wondering, I was like, uh-oh, technical issues, but
yeah.
we
You
move
you
on.
weren't boring. It definitely wasn't because I wasn't interested in what you were saying. No, it was the charger, I promise.
I was like, oh, well, this is going well. I mean,
Yeah. God, I can't even keep my co-host's attention. How are we gonna keep the students' attention?
exactly. But hey, anyway, let's move on to another thing related to the topic. And It is, well, writing. Do we think that it's necessary to get into the habit of writing in English? And if so, how would you recommend people do it?
So I think it's very useful. I know lots of people would disagree and say that writing in English can only improve your writing, your written English. I disagree. I think, as we mentioned, immersion and repetition, by writing phrases, it's going to help your brain correct any mistakes and actually make your speaking better. It's just, for me, it's memory. It's a memory tactic more than anything. With regards to how, I'm not really too sure. I would normally recommend my students to write a journal, maybe, but I know that can be very cliche, very kind of, oh, I don't want to write a diary. It's like, oh, no, it's not a diary. It's just a journal to practice English. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, or if you have any better advice to practice writing.
I mean, one thing that I think is really, really vital and really helpful is like chatting, texting. So whether that's when you're meeting someone on Tinder or with your friends on WhatsApp or with different people in forums, I think like actual chatting is a really good way of testing your memory to see if you remember different words and phrases to then use them in the conversation. And that way you also realize where you have some blind spots and where you have some areas that need a lot of work is through writing, because there is a lot less pressure than the moment of speaking. Because if you are writing, then you can take your time. You don't have to respond immediately. You can also look things up as well on word reference or a dictionary. So I think it's a good way of doing it. And if you don't have that many people that you would normally chat to in English, I said it earlier, ChatGPT. Like you can just send a little bit of, I don't know, a diary, a journal to ChatGPT and ask it to correct you and provide other advanced phrases at the same time. Or literally, you can just say, "Hey, how are you? Ask me some questions." And then you can respond to these questions and you can double check all of the meanings and translations. So that is the modern way of doing it that, of course, we didn't have a few years ago.
Yeah.
And it's changed completely.
I really like the advice with Tinder as well, because obviously it might sound crazy to some people, but no, we don't mean like in a dating or sexual way. It's just a great opportunity to practice English, whether it's written English over the Tinder app, or if you feel comfortable enough to meet this person, it then becomes speaking practice. So yeah, I think dating in general, as long as it's done safely and respectfully, I think that can be a great way to practice a language. That's one of the reasons I speak Spanish is from dating Mexican and Spanish girls. And I was forced to use it as well as with my friends. It's just that extra push. You've got your friends, add something else. You watch a series in English, add a podcast. It's always about those little extra things that can make a big difference.
I mean, I think a good language learner has to be a little bit like a sponge. And what I mean by this is that sponges, they absorb and soak up different things from the people who are around them. So in my case, I'm not usually like a sponge, but when I'm around different Spaniards, Spanish speakers, I'm always listening very attentively to see what they say, how they say it, if they use any nice phrases to then teach these phrases on Instagram, for example. And I think everybody can learn something from this and try to basically copy the way that people speak. This could be from famous people on films, but it could also be with random other people and try to sound like them. And this goes back to the whole philosophy and strategy of learning languages, which is called shadowing, because you are trying to shadow another person and sound like them. And I've definitely done this with my fiance quite a lot. Sometimes it worked out perfectly. And then other times where I'd start to sound very feminine when I was speaking Spanish because she'd use different words and phrases that usually a guy wouldn't use. But because
Yeah.
I was being a bit of a sponge and soaking up all of the vocabulary from her, I started to say things like, ay, que cookie, ay, que mono, es precioso. And I'd
My
almost,
my example was "Que fuerte, que
que
fuerte," but, like,
fuerte,
really
tía.
exaggerating because my girlfriend would always, "Que fuerte," and I said it in front of my guy friends, I like just, "Que fuerte está suficiente," no, like, "Que fuerte." So, yeah, I totally get what you mean.
It's when you say tía. It's like, ay, tía,
Yeah, yeah.
que fuerte, tía.
Mimitos was another one, "I quiero mimitos." It's just yeah.
Exactly. So, of course, be aware of how much you do copy people. But 9 times out of 10, if you are copying someone you want to speak like, then you will notice that through this shadowing practice, your fluency will sound so much better.
100% agree. Yeah. I've met some people in England who have watched maybe soap operas, but like on the EastEnders, as you very well know, EastEnders, which is a soap opera set in the East End of London. And so you hear these Spanish people like, all right, darling, you want to go to the pub later? And it's really funny because they've just mimicked, which is great. I think it's a really good way to learn a language. But then they sound like these East End London cockneys, and it's really funny. Yeah.
Play. It's a very, very good tip. And I think we've gone over a lot of these main points of immersing yourself in a language, even if you don't live in an English speaking country. But I don't know, Chris, if there are any other things you'd like to bring up before we move on to your joke.
Nothing specifically. I would just like to highlight what we mentioned, that it's all about immersion. I think all of the things we've spoken about, the Netflix, podcasts, speaking, it's all about immersion. Studying for 1 hour a week is okay, but 5 minutes or 10 minutes every day is better than 1 hour a week, in my opinion. So I think, yeah, more than anything, it's immersion. I don't know if you have any other little tidbits, any more advice or something you'd like to highlight?
No, that's it, to be honest. I think, of course, time is a very valuable resource for all of us, and time is money at the same time, and it's limited. There's only so much we can do, which is why I think the easiest way to immerse yourself in English is by changing your existing habits from Spanish into English, and that way you're not giving away any extra time. You're still gonna have the same free time that you have at the moment. It's just that you're gonna be really making the most of this free time. And you're going to be taking advantage of your existing habits to immerse yourself in English.
Yeah, 100% agree.
So let's finish off, as always, with a joke. Chris, I'm all ears. Soy todo oídos. Tell me that.
So, my dad joke for this week is, did you hear about the two cannibals that were eating a clown? One said to the other, does this taste funny to you? Terrible. I know, terrible.
Mm.
So again, very quickly, I know it's not funny to explain the joke, but obviously we're English teachers. Lewis, there are two meanings of funny. So someone is funny, like a clown is funny. But what does it mean when we say like food tastes funny?
Yeah, so if something tastes or also smells funny, or maybe even looks funny, it looks strange. It tastes strange. It smells strange. So funny is, of course, ha 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 ha, funny, but it's also a way of saying strange or weird. So yeah, they were cannibals eating a clown. A clown is funny, and it tasted a bit strange. It tasted a bit
Yeah,
funny.
this tastes a bit funny to you. Yeah, so, and just, I think cannibal is the same in Spanish, on cannibal. Yeah,
Exactly.
perfect. So we don't need to translate that. But yeah, that's my terrible dad joke for this week.
Awesome. So, let's leave it there, but let us know in the comments. Have you spent time abroad improving your English, or have you done the opposite and managed to artificially immerse yourself in English without ever leaving your own country? So, I'd be eager to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. Chris, thanks for being here as well, despite the technical difficulties, but we move on.
Sorry, yeah, I've been holding my phone for the last 15 minutes. I'm still in England, but I'm flying back to Spain tomorrow. So for next week's episode, I'll be a lot more technically prepared with my chargers and my background and everything. So thank you for bearing with me and bearing with my technical difficulties. Aguantar or soportar, to bear with my technical difficulties. And yeah, thank you everyone for listening. As Lewis mentioned, if anyone has any of your own advice or suggestions, something that's worked for you, please let us know in the comments so that it can help other students who are listening.
Perfect. So, thank you and see you next time.
Thank you, mate. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.